the Big 12 has big plans, and I told you yesterday and really all week, we've been working on this UConn story, really trying to uncover the genesis of it, because the timing has always felt suspect to me. Like, why now? Why is this coming out now? I've been digging on that a little bit, and I've been trying to figure out, what does UConn unlock that Gonzaga does not? Because it makes, in my opinion, and a lot of people's opinion, much more sense to add Gonzaga to this conference than it does UConn. So we may have unlocked that equation yesterday when we talked to a source close to the situation who told us that the Big 12's pursuit of UConn and adding UConn ahead of anything else and everybody else is directly tied to their grand plan if and when the ACC melts down. Because I was told yesterday by sources close to the situation that the Big 12 feels confident that if they add UConn, that they will then be able to add Gonzaga, which they believe, and really I think the important phraseology that was used to me yesterday was, they have been led to believe, the Big 12 has, that if they can get UConn and Gonzaga, that Duke and North Carolina are much more on the table. Is that likely? We can have that debate. Does UNC ultimately end up in the Big 12? We can have that debate. But my sources are telling me that the Big 12 is being as aggressive as they can be with UConn, because they believe it begins a process of knocking over the dominoes. If they add UConn, they believe that they would have much more leverage to add Gonzaga. And if and when the ACC comes apart, they believe that it gives them far more ability to add Duke, North Carolina. I was also told yesterday that this is where Florida State comes into play, because as I've told you on this show, Florida State, in fact, values their basketball product, and the Big 12 values Florida State football. So we've wondered aloud about the rationale and what is the common sense of Florida State coming to the Big 12. Well, if you add UConn, Gonzaga, Duke, North Carolina, I'm told the other school that the Big 12 has their sights set on is Virginia. If you add those universities, it seems like a much more plausible scenario to get Florida State. Now, is all of this likely to happen? I don't think we're at the point of, is it likely or not? I think what you are watching with this UConn situation is Brett Yormark, and say what you will about Endeavor's involvement with the Big 12 and in college athletics. They're certainly a power player in the grand scheme of things. I think there's no question about that anymore. I think when you look at the Big 12 and their partners at Endeavor, and you look at what UConn represents, I don't think there's any doubt that if UConn joins this conference, especially if they do not bring football at the onset, because again, I think it is a really critical point that has been brought to me multiple times by multiple sources, that UConn football is a loss leader. And more than half of Big 12 administrators have said they do not favor subsidizing UConn football in the Big 12. And that is a really important point, because I think if you can get UConn, even if it's basketball and every other sport, into the Big 12 in the near future, which seems likely for the 2026 season, it is far more clear, I think, the path to, I think, the Big 12's ability to add UConn, Gonzaga, Duke, North Carolina, Florida State, and Virginia becomes a much easier path to that ultimate outcome. And I don't know that we've ever been in a place where we've been able to say that. But from what I was told yesterday by sources close to the situation, the urgency surrounding UConn, the why right now answer is it begins that process of pushing over the dominoes. And Jake, I think if the Big 12 is able to accomplish this, I think it is absolutely a changing, ever-evolving situation for the Big 12 that puts them by far, and it's not close, on top of the college basketball world.
Absolutely. And I think that, that's the key for the Big 12. We've heard for so long that, basketball and football are their own divisions within the Big 12, that they're their own separate, business entities, if you will. And I think Brett Yormark sees an opportunity here where the Big 12 maybe is not the football conference that the Big 10 and the SEC are, but the Big 12 certainly could be a better basketball conference than either of those two. And so what is Brett Yormark doing here? He's positioning himself to be ready in case the ACC melts down, and positioning the conference to be ready and be prepared to make the most of that opportunity. We've seen this before where, the Big Ten with the Pac-12 situation said, hey, like, we don't want to be seen to be raiding that conference. But as soon as that conference melted down, what did we get? We got the Big Ten was prepared. The Big 12 was prepared. So this is hardly the first time we've seen behavior like this, where there's smoke out east and the Big 12 or any other conference is preparing itself. And I think this concept of the Big 12, trying to latch onto this opportunity to be, to create what would certainly be the best basketball conference in our country and in college athletics, it is a brilliant one. This is right up Brett Yormark's alley of, hey, I see an opportunity. I think that we can go and attain that opportunity. And all we have to do is figure out how to work through the UConn situation. And if we can do that, then we up our chances very much with other major brands in the landscape. The UNC piece of it, I think people like to speculate a ton on UNC. Like, hey, isn't UNC a Big Ten school? Isn't UNC this or that? I don't think we know what people's, thought process is on where they'd like to go until we're truly in the moment. Like, obviously UNC in the Big Ten is a nice fit. It makes a lot of sense, but also UNC is a basketball school traditionally. You're telling me that UNC wouldn't value being in the best basketball conference in the country at that point? So I think there's a lot of, unknown in terms of how schools like UNC would view this, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Dukes and the UNCs and these other powerhouse basketball programs would be excited about this.
I think the other part of it, before we get to what's likely, because I think what's likely is very different than what the plan is or what the hope is, let's say. But I think one of the other things that I find so fascinating, and having this conversation yesterday, and the particular person that I spoke to yesterday is very well placed. And I think it's interesting that somebody in that position agrees that the ACC is very much where the Pac-12 was when USC and UCLA left. And when USC usurped everybody else in that conference and left for the Big Ten. You look at where the Pac-12 would be today if they had added Big 12 schools. We would be having a very different conversation. I bring that point up because I think Brett Yormark is acutely aware that you cannot let things happen for you. You cannot let things happen to you. You have to do things to solidify yourself and improve your situation. And I think if you look at the brands that we're talking about, I think UConn and Gonzaga has had an open invitation to this conference for at least 18 months. At least 18 months.
I like Gonzaga.
And they have not accepted that invitation at this point. And I think it is because they are waiting for things to happen for them. And I think it's a mistake if you're Gonzaga, because your window will shrink. But I also think if you're UConn, you are absolutely in the right position being proactive. And I think UConn understands you have to strike while the iron's hot. But I also think the Big 12 understands that as well. And if you add UConn, I think it opens up conversations across every ACC territory. There is no doubt about that, because I also am a passionate believer that Virginia and UNC are likely, if that conference melts down, to go to the Big Ten. I think it is as simple as that. I just don't believe that North Carolina, which is an academic institution of the highest order, would partner itself up in the Big 12. I have heard that for over a year. We've been talking about this. I don't believe that UNC has any other destination but the Big Ten. That's what I've been told. I've had those conversations. They value academic partnerships, but they also value their relationship with Duke. And I can tell you, and I think we've had the exclusive on Duke to the Big 12 for months and months now. I can tell you that Brett Yormark and his emissaries have had real, tangible conversations with people in the ACC, including Duke. And I can tell you that there is a framework that Duke will operate in. And if you add Gonzaga and UConn, Duke will have very serious conversations with you.
Well, it gives them something to be excited about, right? I mean, it gives
Absolutely.
them it gives them a reason to want to engage with you, because at that point now you're not talking about having to justify whether the Big 12 would be the best basketball conference in the country or not. It would very clearly be head and shoulders above everybody else.
It would not even be a conversation.
Yeah.
And I think you look at Duke, and I think it is the only avenue to get North Carolina if you're the Big 12. And that's why I think it's not accidental that the language that was used to me by this particular source was this is a plan that is very much like a row of dominoes. UConn's that first domino, Gonzaga's that second domino, and then a phone call with Duke is that third one. And if you are able to get Duke, and I believe, from what I've been told, the Big 12 believes that they can get Duke. But they are going to strengthen their position with UConn and Gonzaga first. I think that is their plan. Now, does Gonzaga play ball? I don't know how you don't. If UConn's in this conference, when you add it to what is already the deepest basketball conference in the country, I don't know how Gonzaga says no. Let's pretend they say yes. You get UConn, you get Gonzaga. You pick up the phone and you call Duke. That's a hard conversation for Duke to turn down.
Mm-hmm.
And if Duke calls North Carolina, that's a hard conversation for North Carolina to turn down.
Especially when you consider at that point the ACC would not be in a great place. I mean, obviously we would be having conversations about, exit strategies.
Well, at that point, I think the ACC is not going to exist.
Yeah.
But I also think the relationship between UConn and the ACC is very interesting, because it is Oklahoma State in the Pac-12, as it was pointed out to me yesterday. UConn could be in the ACC today and chose not to do that. There was an absolute conversation and courtship there. They chose not to do that. And I think wisely so. I think the writing's always been on the wall in the ACC. I think most people felt like we were going to, by now, August 29th, 2024, that we would have been to 2 conferences already, and maybe the Pac-12 is still around. Well, all of that changed over the last 2 years. The moment that USC made that announcement, that fateful announcement 2 years ago, I guess at this point, that they were leaving the Pac-12 to go to the Big Ten, that's when this entire game changed.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the hiring of Brett Yormark, that's when this entire game changed. His relationships across entertainment and sports, that's what changed this game. And I think when you look at this situation, if you are the Big 12, I think you are operating at a very high level. You are exactly where you are supposed to be. And Brett Yormark is exactly what a conference commissioner should be. Proactive, forecasting, looking ahead, taking advantage of market opportunities and conditions. That's exactly what this is. And as I told you all those months ago, Brett Yormark doesn't value the Big 12. Oh, the truck stop flyover conference, bro. Let's go to Buc-ee's. That's not how Brett Yormark looks at the Big 12.
Right.
And I think that is huge, because he doesn't see what the Big 12 is in 2024. He sees what the Big 12 can be in 2034. He has a vision of what the Big 12 can be in the future, and he is going to operate in an effort and in a manner and a fashion to get him to that vision. And the other thing I think is so important here is his constituents and membership are all on board with it. And why? How could you not be?
Yeah, I mean, how is it not something you're excited about? How is it not something that you're, you know, absolutely vetting out, pursuing, chasing? Like, how is it not something that you're going after? I mean, look, I think the Big 12 has a lot of haters. A lot of people, out east, hate on the Big 12 and say that the Big 12 is like somehow, a lesser conference or, whatever the argument is. I'm sure we've got people today who are hating on the Big 12 in the comments section. But the reality
Certainly.
is the Big 12 is the third best conference in our country. I mean, obviously it's the SEC and the Big 10 kind of playing on their own level right now, but I would take the Big 12 over the ACC 7 days a week. I think the Big 12 is a deeper basketball conference. I think on the football field, what are we even talking about? The ACC, if you're going to sit here today and try and make the case that the ACC somehow is a better conference on the football field, I don't know what you're looking at.
And again, I think football plays a big part of this. I think the fact that Duke and North Carolina, what do you say about Duke and North Carolina football? I mean, Drake May, who breaking news in the NFL, Drake May is not the starter in New England, by the way. Wisely so. Jacoby Brissett announced as the starter today. Drake May just went at the top of the draft.
Mm-hmm.
You have multiple quarterbacks now. I can't even say his name without vomiting. Mitch Trubisky and Drake May. God, that sucks. You're looking at Daniel Jones. Like, they're good. They put guys in the NFL. They're not great. And if you're Duke or North Carolina and I say to you, you can win a championship in football or basketball, you're probably still taking football.
Yeah.
Those are basketball schools. And I think if you look at Duke and North Carolina, would you rather have Duke and North Carolina football or UConn football? Would you rather have Duke and North Carolina?
Right.
But my point is, the Super League takes all of this away. And it's why, again, and I know I'm just some jackalope that has, trust me, bro. But again, I just say to you, basketball is becoming more and more of a priority when it comes to revenue because of the cost of football participation. If it is, and I said this the other day and got railed for it, but if it is in fact true, I told you, a source of mine the other day told me football is going to cost universities $200 million a year.
Mm-hmm.
That's a massive number. A massive number. And people still don't believe that basketball is an incredibly important part of an athletic department.
And I think we haven't even gotten to the fact that they're going to expand the tournament, right? So there's going to be more opportunity for premier basketball conferences to get more shares.
And in the Big 12, if you can monopolize preseason made-for-TV games, why wouldn't you do that? Because if you add Duke and Carolina, and part of the conversation I had yesterday, what does Duke and Carolina do for you? Well, it gives you Duke, Carolina, Kansas, Gonzaga, Houston. Look at the brands. Look at the brand. The preseason, you don't have to include. Who else do you have to include? Who else? You can go to Madison Square Garden. You can go to the finest basketball palaces in this country.
Mm-hmm.
And put on a Big 12 preseason showcase. You can now tell yourself, without question, we are the best basketball brand in the country in the Big 12. Now it's bigger than Rucker Park. Now it's bigger than Mexico. Right? We're talking about a game-changing move by the Big 12, and I'm here for it. I know that we're the Pac-12 channel and the SEC channel and everything else you guys accuse us of being fat Mormon that's going to die soon. Totally get it.
Right.
What I'm telling you is that this is a win-win. Let's, excuse me, let's talk about what's likely to happen. Here's what I think is likely to happen. I think it is not likely you get Duke and North Carolina. What I think now is likely to happen, I think you get UConn. I think you get Gonzaga. I think you get Miami, Florida State, Louisville, and one of the Virginia schools. I think if you can add Virginia to this conference, fantastic. I also think Pitt becomes a very interesting university.
Well, obviously you've got a comfortability there with West Virginia.
And it's a no-brainer regionally. But what I think is likely, I think I have to believe that Florida State on some level at some point is going to have to understand who they are and where they are, because their ego is incredibly inflated. So obviously we have to wait for this lawsuit, and let's see what happens with Clemson and Florida State.
Mm-hmm.
But what I think is likely to happen, I think the ACC melts down on some level, because when guys like Brett Yormark and people like Endeavor are involved, they're not spinning their wheels and wasting their time.
For no reason.
There is a belief, from what I was told yesterday, inside the Big 12 that they can pull it off. I think what's likely to happen, Duke and North Carolina go to the Big 10. I think that those two institutions, it's the one knock that I have on the Big 12. Academically speaking, you're not a great conference.
Yeah. There's no getting away from that.
It
is what it is.
It is what it is.
It's why when Utah joined the conference, you heard all that Big Ten smoke.
Utah, Colorado, I think the Arizona schools bring you really good education and partnership opportunities. But again, it's the state of Texas. It is the Oak State. Like you need these institutions to raise their bars academically, because I believe if you were the Pac-12 and the ACC melted down, okay, we'd be having a different conversation. But I think if I said to the people on Tobacco Road, hey, do you want to partner with boy, I almost undersold the lead. Part of the conversation yesterday, does Duke and North Carolina want to be seen to be doing business with Michigan? Legitimate part of the conversation I had yesterday.
Yeah, I would say, considering the fact that if you do some flipping around the internet yesterday, that some of the details are reportedly being leaked on what all is in this notice of allegations. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that schools like UNC and Duke, generally speaking, are not looking to be seen doing business with Michigan right now. That's just, I know that that's a hot take, but I don't think that I would be looking to be seen to be doing business with Michigan. I think that right now is kind of a flammable situation.
I think that is a very flammable situation, but here nor there, any way you slice it. If I said to Tobacco Road today, how would you like to be in business with Northwestern, USC, Oregon and Washington, two very good academic universities. Again, Northwestern in their car wash. The Ohio State. Absolutely. Where do I sign? That's, it's undeniable.
But I think
undeniable.
I think it fits in both cases, though. I would agree that Duke and UNC, on its face, is a better fit in the Big Ten. It makes more sense.
No.
About that.
What do you say about Virginia schools? Virginia Tech and Virginia.
Well, I think Tech is a Big 12 school, and I think Virginia is a Big 10 school. I think I only say that because I think Virginia's been prolific on the basketball side in the tournament over the last 10 years. They've had multiple appearances. They've had deep runs.
Put guys in the NBA.
Virginia's got a powerhouse basketball program. But Virginia, I'm a big believer when we look at these different examples, like whether it was the Pac-12 thing or this ACC thing now, you can look at a school and you can say, yeah, Miami feels like more of a Big 12 school, but they could be a borderline Big 10 school depending on how things shake out.
And I know that it grinds people when we talk about this academic stuff. And I don't know why it grinds people, but it feels like it pisses people off. It certainly did in the Pac-12.
Mm-hmm.
And I certainly believe that Duke and North Carolina are That's the heartbeat of the ACC. Like there's no,
Right. Yeah.
it's inarguable at this point.
And I think what's difficult, like look at it, how the ACC started the football season this year. There's no better example. Like the ACC is a
I can't
believe
believe they
conference.
lost that game.
Yeah, and I think the
Man.
reason I point that out is just to say that it's a basketball first conference, because when anytime your conference is in a position where, hey, our one hope loses their first game, and in all likelihood their season's over unless they somehow just run the table and DJ turns into a different guy.
Right.
Like you're a basketball conference, and that's fine. But we're sitting here talking about the Big 12 positioning themselves to pick up, Louisville and Pitt and, all these different schools in the ACC. Like, it's no surprise. And again, I'm just telling you, the Big 12 is going to take advantage of it, and they're going to be the best basketball conference in the country because, again, the Super League is going to change the dynamic in football. So the Big 12, in my opinion, it no longer has to think about it in terms of, hey, how do we compete with the SEC and the Big 10? All you have to think about is, let's make sure we're making that money in basketball. And then, whoever in our conference can qualify for the Super League, which should be a good bit of the Big 12, frankly, we'll get into the Super League and we'll be good to go. Like that's why they're doing this.
I think, I just think that Duke and North Carolina are Big 10 teams. And I don't believe it's revenue driven. Obviously, the Big 10, the revenue box is checked, right? But if you're the Big 12, I would assume, and I mean, I wonder what you guys think, but I would assume that come 2031, you're going to be, I would have to assume that you're going to be an $80 million a year conference. If you're doing another TV deal. Now, it's interesting. I've been trying to understand what future TV deals look like. I don't think anybody knows.
Yeah, that's a tough question right now.
Because TV money is not endless. You look at what's going on at ESPN and Disney. There's no more. You look at Warner Brothers Discovery, you look at CBS, like there's no more endless fountain of cash just spewing all over the place for TV deals.
But I think that's why you need the made for TV preseason matchups in basketball. You have to have that stuff.
But I think you have to have that stuff so that you can have Dr. Pepper.
Yeah.
So that you can have Phillips 66.
Aflac.
The big brands that you see spending money, they're the ones that are going to power this stuff. Because I think if you are, again, Warner Brothers Discovery, you don't have the money to go and buy the NBA. So, like, you look at Turner, Warner Brothers Discovery, who are they talking to about a licensing deal right now? Live Golf. They're not talking to the NFL. They're not talking to the NBA. They're suing the NBA. But you look at the major players in TV: CBS, NBC, ABC, ESPN, and Disney. Their money's not endless. And so when 2031 comes around, what does that deal look like? Well, if you've got Duke and Carolina, Gonzaga and UConn, you're already a more valuable brand. But that's to Fox. Right? Because Fox is we're all aware at this point, Fox has the majority of the Big 12 basketball package.
Right.
So I don't think there's any doubt that Fox is going to buy that. There's no question. I don't think there's any doubt that ESPN and Disney, who have an incredible partnership with Brett Yormark, that relationship, again, I was told the other day, is rock solid. They're going to buy that. But for what cost? In 2031, is $80 million still? Is that still a lot of money per team, per school, rather?
I mean,
in 2031,
bro, it sounds ludicrous right now, but in 2031, who the
I
hell
don't know.
knows? I think
I don't know.
I think the other problem is there are a lot of college football fans and folks who feel like 2031 is far away. And by TV contract language, it's not far away at all. It's here. You're already talking about it. You're already saying, hey, like, by the time we get through, because remember, with the way TV contracts work, once you have 2 years left, you're starting that new negotiation. You're not going to let it get to, hey, we have a month left. Let's
You're not
start
playing the
negotiating.
Pac-12
Yeah,
game.
you're not going to get in danger the way the Pac-12 got in danger. So again, that's why I'm saying, like, when people are like, oh, you guys don't know what the hell you're talking about, the Super League is bullshit, like, we're not, that's
Watch
all
your
fake.
language.
Yeah, it's a family show. Like that's what we hear in the comment section all the time, both during the show and after the show. Everyone's like, oh, it's not real, it's fake. Oh, yeah. Okay, well, if it's so fake, then why is it that you're hearing head coaches talking about it? If it's so fake, why is it
Kyle Whittingham,
that guys like Kyle Whittingham are talking about it, and then
wait, get it right. Why is it that Kyle Whittingham is now parroting our language on this show when he's doing interviews on 365?
Yeah,
talking about NFL models.
I mean, is it any coincidence that we talked about it, and then a month later you've got Witt talking about it at Big 12 Media Days? Like, it's not a coincidence, dude.
No, it's not a coincidence.
So,
it's a foregone conclusion. And I think to put a bow on this and to reset it, because I see a bunch of people coming on. I bring up this TV number in 2031 because if you extrapolate and project forward, UConn joins basketball and other sports in 2026. UConn football joins in 2031. Oh, that's funny. That's the same time the Big 12 TV contract's up.
Oh.
So now, if you're at 40 million now, let's just use a baseline number. Every university in the Big 12 gets $40 million.
Right.
2031, let's project $80 million. Every university gets $80 million a year from the rights deal. Oh, that makes UConn football a lot more palatable. They can pay for themselves a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
And then every university is getting a lot more money.
Well, and we know that the Big 12 and other conferences have already started talking about, hey, your performance is going to dictate how much of the share you get on an annual basis. Yeah. So, if you're adding, let's just go with what we know or what we've heard, which is UConn basketball until 2031, and then football is going to come into the picture. Okay, well, you're basically a half share school at that point. And then based on what your football program does, you obviously have the ability to earn more, but you're going to have to prove that your football program can go ahead and do that. So I think it's a very interesting, because UConn wouldn't be a Super League team on the football field. You're not, obviously.
I would agree with that.
You're not going to be a Super League team. So if UConn's not a Super League team on the football field.
Just remember, they're an independent.
Yeah.
The Big East doesn't have football. So you're an independent at this point. I mean, I think it makes perfect sense. And to reset all of this, if you're just hopping on the show, sources told us yesterday that the Big 12, in fact, has a grand plan. And we've been trying to figure out, well, what's the urgency all of a sudden?
Why
what's
now
the impetus?
in the middle of summer?
Yeah, what's the impetus with UConn in August
to
be adding them in 2026? Well, the impetus is now, if our sourcing is accurate, and I have no reason to believe it's not, the impetus is it's a domino effect. The Big 12, according to well-placed sources, I believe the Big 12 is looking to add UConn ASAP because they believe that will allow them to get Gonzaga. If they get Gonzaga, they believe that if and when the ACC melts down, that will give them access to Duke and North Carolina. If they get Duke and North Carolina, they also believe that they can get Florida State. And I think the big unknown here is, if they get Florida State, Duke, and North Carolina with UConn and Gonzaga, is that enough to pull Virginia? Remains to be seen. Again, what's likely? Probably not. But do you make plans based on what is likely or what you think you can, or do you shoot for the moon? In these situations, very clearly you're shooting for the moon.
Well, and I think if you shoot for the moon and you miss on Duke and UNC, let's say, but you settle on Miami, NC State, Va Tech, I mean, that's a pretty good, that's a pretty good supplement to what is already a great basketball conference.
And I think that if you shoot for the moon and you miss and you end up with, I think there is a really good chance they get Florida State. If all of this comes to fruition, I think Florida State, Miami, and again, I don't know why, and I have been guilty of this. A lot of people are underselling Louisville as a football and basketball brand.
Yeah.
I think Louisville would be a
solid.
huge get for the Big 12.
Yeah.
I think if you miss, let's say you miss Virginia, Duke, and Carolina. Okay, great. If you're able to get Virginia Tech, if you're able to get Florida State, Miami, Louisville, UConn, and Gonzaga, if you're able to add those universities to your league, you're still in a really good place.
Yes.
And I think, and this is the other part of it, I think that gets you an exponentially larger TV contract in 2031.
And I also think the other point I always like to make in these conversations, because again, this presumes that the ACC doesn't exist anymore.
It does.
And melts down. So if that's the case, I also think the point of, hey, the Big 12 again doesn't have to compete per se with the Big 10 and the SEC, right? Like it's not like, hey, the Big 12's looking to like supersede these two conferences, or know, it's more of a situation where because the Pac-12 doesn't exist anymore, and then at that point the ACC wouldn't exist anymore, we have a 3-conference setup where everyone has a natural role.
Yeah,
where
100%.
The Big 12 slots in right underneath these two guys. Obviously the Big 12 schools would round out the Super League in football. And then I think the tournament in terms of expansion could expand into a really nice number. I don't know how many seeds you would expand to initially, but if you have a 3-conference setup, that makes expanding the tournament a much easier conversation at that point. There's less people at the table.
I think this is exactly what the Big 12 should be doing.
Yeah.
You cannot be the little brother and playing defense. That's not going to work. If you want to be the behemoth in the room, and if you want the respect that you believe you've earned, you got to take it. Nobody's going to give it to you. You got to take it. And I think that's exactly what the Big 12 is doing here. Are they wrecking the ACC? They're not. But I don't think there's any question that Brett Yormark and his partners at Endeavor are more than happy to look at all the members of the ACC on the edge of that cliff and push a couple over. Because this league is not far from imploding on itself, regardless of what happens in that courtroom.
Mm-hmm.
There is an avenue if you can get, and again, I think Notre Dame's a big part of it, because Notre Dame, if they're going to join a league, it's going to be the Big 10, and the only reason they would do that is if the ACC melts down. In my opinion, I think if you are Brett Yormark and Endeavor, and you can secure a bag in 2031, the ACC is as good as gone.
Mm-hmm.
That's my opinion, based on what I've been told and sources I've spoken to. I think that's the likely scenario. I think the ACC is going to struggle to unify. And I do think Endeavor is a big part of it. They're really good business people. And while nobody's told me that, my opinion is that Endeavor is working behind the scenes to put the Big 12 in a much, much better financial position,
yes,
in a much better financial situation. And they are leveraging relationships, as Brett Yormark has done and is doing. I think the ACC is on the clock. I've never said that on this show before, but I feel like now this is the first time people in the right places are indicating that the ACC is on the clock.
I think the ACC thing too is like, if you're UNC and Duke, you're the biggest schools in that conference. You also probably have some fatigue from the conversation of, is our conference going to melt down or not? And we saw this dynamic play out in the Pac-12 where schools were tired of talking about, hey, is it going to melt down or not? Or what are we going to do? Like, schools want to, administrators of these big time brands want to be able to say, hey, yeah, our conference is strong. we're heading in this direction. This is what our money looks like. This is what we're working on. They don't want to dwell in this sort of rain cloud situation that is the ACC right now. So I just there's a ton of time left in this. There's a lot of stuff that remains to be seen. But I'm just telling you, the Big 12 is going to be ready, and I would expect nothing less.
I don't think anymore that you can worry about perception versus reality. I think that the hard lessons that were learned in the Pac-12 are resonating today. And I think that Brett Yormark, who had a front row seat watching the Pac-12 meltdown, I think you either have it or you don't. And I think when 2031 gets here, you better have value. Because if you're going to go and you're going to sell yourself to ESPN, you better come with a really strong value position. And I think that's exactly what this is about.
Yeah.
Because we are watching the end of big money deals in television. There is no question about that. The days of, I think this Big Ten contract with Fox, NBC, and CBS, obviously most of that money is on Fox's books. Equity partners ownership in the Big Ten network, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that we ever see $100 million per school of a TV deal again, just on a straight media rights deal. I don't think we'll see that. I look at what's going on with Warner Brothers Discovery. I look at the way that Disney is having to push top down. I mean, you look at the restructuring that happened inside ESPN this week.
Yeah.
Devastating.
Yeah.
Devastating.
Well, I also think that, college football tends to take things from the NFL on a pretty regular basis.
Absolutely.
And the NFL this week, the owners in the NFL voted to approve 10% ownership from private equity firms.
Equity stakes.
And I think when you see things like that in the NFL, you can expect that to follow into college football. And so to your point about, hey, these current TV deals that we're seeing are going to be the last behemoth, crazy number TV deals. They're going to be the last ones because private equity is going to come in and bridge that gap.
And you guys all told me how crazy I was. Again, fat Mormon guy who's dying soon. That's not really a Mormon. SEC fan,
Utah fan,
yeah. BYU fan,
right.
Fat BYU fan,
Gundy hater,
mullet hater.
Yeah.
When I told you, hey, you're going to see things you're not going to like. You're going to see corporate badges on fields.
Mm-hmm.
No. We have corporate logos on the field. What have I told you about helmet stickers?
Yep.
What do we have on helmets now?
Yep.
The mullet.
Now,
right?
I don't agree with how they're doing that, but we do have it.
I mean, how are you going to scan that QR code? Just
seriously.
Asking for a friend. I think practice jersey patches. I think stadium deals. I think this is who we are now.
Yes.
This is who we are now. You want to pay players? This is who we are now. You want to have NCAA football 24th? This is who we are now.
Yes.
And I think this is why Endeavor and Brett Yormark, everybody looks at Endeavor as the devil. They're not the devil. They're a conduit to massive revenue generation. And that's what's keeping the future of the Big 12 illuminated. So, all right, enough of us, more of you. The comment section on a daily basis on this show is brought to you by our friends at Prize Picks. And listen, you guys, I'm just, again, fat old Mormon guy that's not a Mormon who's going to die soon, right?
Dilly.
I love the guys at Prize Picks, and I think they love me because I woke up this morning, and I think we all know that when you are a healthy, red-blooded, full of testosterone male, in the morning,
Stay hard.
You're, things are happening.
I'm so bricked up right now.
And then you open your Prize Picks app and you see a Caleb Williams promo for week 1 of more or less half a yard passing.
Yeah.
And you understand that the guys at Prize Picks watch this show. And you understand these sons of britches, they get it.
Yeah.
Caleb Williams, half a yard passing, week 1 in the NFL. What are you waiting for?
Stay hard.
What are you waiting for? Cam Rising, 3 million yards passing tonight. What are you waiting for?
Obvi.
What are you waiting for? This is the time of year when Prize Picks is unbelievable. Use the promo code Monty. Right there, you see it. Download the app. It's in the link in the description on our YouTube channel. Hello, everybody on the X platform, Facebook, TikTok. Hello. Get on board. Hook it up. Download the Prize Picks app. Use the promo code Monty. You deposit $5. $5. They're going to give you 50 more. It is the single best daily fantasy promo I've ever seen. You deposit $5, they'll give you 50 more. Use the promo code Monty, M-O-N-T-Y. That's how you hook it up. And it is really an easy proposition. Won again last night, thanks to Shohei and his dog.
Yeah.
I do not like wagering on Shohei because I feel bad like I'm enabling his addiction.
Great gambler.
The great gambler. I don't like wagering on the great gambler, but I did. And I would just like to thank the great gambler for his contributions to my pocketbook.
Mm-hmm.
Him and his little dog too.
How about that?
Yeah, thank you for that, Shohei.
Thank you, Toto.
I thought it was amazing last night. Did you see Shohei's dog throughout the first pitch? Nobody cares. I thought it was animal
Did you
abuse.
see Dodger fan lining up for 7 hours outside of Chavez Ravine to get his bobblehead?
4.5
Come
was the
on,
number.
dude.
Hits, runs, and RBIs for Shohei the gambler last night. 2 hits, 3 runs, 1 RBI. That'd be 6.
Fucking A.
Daddy's a winner. Now, you want to talk about Cubs baseball? Let's talk about Cubs baseball. Because I did not bet on the Cubs yesterday. I did bet on Paul Skeens.
Yeah.
5.5 strikeouts, more or less. More. He got 6.
Boom.
Thank you. The Cubs won in impressive fashion. They scored 2 in the 7th, 3 in the 8th, 6 in the 9th to win 14-10. And then, of course, because
14-10.
14-10. Because Chaboy has been red hot. Of course, we bet the WNBA again. I'd like to thank Katie Clark.
Yeah.
Points, rebounds, and assists. 24.5. I was nervous for a long time last night. 19 points, 5 boards, 5 dimes.
Yeah, cash money.
That's exactly right. 28.
Boom.
Daddy wins. 3 for 3. I've got golf today, more or less. Tour championship tees off. We've got college football tonight. Prize Picks, baby. Download the app. Use the promo code Monty. You deposit $5. They'll give you 50 more. Then go get the Caleb Williams promo.
Do it.
Half a yard more or less. Caleb Williams. Pretty simple.